Sarah Chen adjusted her camera strap and stepped out of her rental car, gravel crunching beneath her boots. The Holloway Institute loomed before her like a monument to forgotten, suffering 5 stories of crumbling brick and boarded windows. Wrapped in dying ivy, it seemed to pulse in the October wind dot as a photojournalist specializing in abandoned institutions. Sarah had documented dozens of derelict hospitals, schools, and asylums. But something about Holloway felt different. The air itself seemed thick, pressing against her chest with each breath. Closed in 1987 after the patient abuse scandal, she murmured into her voice recorder, reading from her research notes. 143 patients died under suspicious circumstances between 1965 and 1987. Dr. Marcus Holloway, the chief psychiatrist, disappeared the night before the state investigation began. The front entrance was chained shut, but Sarah had found reports of a service door on the east wing that urban explorers used. She shouldered her equipment bag and walked around the building's perimeter, noting the way the afternoon shadows seemed to stretch toward the structure rather than away from it. The service door stood slightly ajar, its red paint peeling like dried blood. Sarah pushed it open with a gloved hand, wincing at the prolonged creak that echoed into the darkness beyond. Her flashlight beam cut through dust motes that danced like tiny spirits in the stale air. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with doors that hung open like screaming mouths. Patient rooms, she realized, their small windows covered with metal grating that cast prison bar shadows on the walls. Sarah began documenting, her camera flash illuminating glimpses of decay. Overturned gurneys, scattered patient files yellowed with age, and strange scratches carved deep into the plaster walls. Too deliberate to be accidental damage. Too chaotic to be writing dot, it was. When she paused to change her camera's memory card that she heard it, a soft shuffling sound from somewhere deeper in the building. Then, cutting through the silence like a blade, came the distant sound of laughter high, brittle and unmistakably human. Sarah's hand froze on her camera. According to every source she'd checked, Holloway had been empty for nearly 4 decades. Laughter came again, closer this time, followed by what sounded like bare feet slapping against linoleum. Detective Ray Morrison had seen the reports. 3 urban explorers in the past 6 months, all found wandering Route 47 in various states of psychological distress, babbling about the patients and Dr. Holloway's rounds. None could coherently explain how they'd ended up miles from the abandoned hospital, and all 3 had been committed to psychiatric facilities within weeks of their rescue. Now Sarah Chen had been missing for 18 hours. Ray pulled his patrol car up to Holloway's gates as the sun began to set, painting the building's facade the color of old blood. He'd been a cop for 22 years, but something about this place made his skin crawl. Maybe it was the stories his grandfather used to tell about working here as a security guard in the 1970s, back when the screaming never stopped and orderlies would quit after a single shift. Dispatch, this is Morrison. I'm 10 to 97 at the Holloway Institute, beginning search for missing person Sarah Chen. Ray's voice crackled back through static. Copy that, Morrison? We've got reports of lights moving inside the building from passing motorists. Backup is 20. Minutes out, 20 minutes. Ray looked up at the building's dark windows and saw what the motorists had reported, a faint, flickering light moving from room to room on the 3rd floor. Too steady to be random vandalism, too purposeful to be anything natural. The same service door Sarah had used hung open, creaking in the evening wind. Ray drew his flashlight and stepped inside, immediately hit by the overwhelming smell of disinfectant and decay, like someone had tried to clean a morgue with bleach and given up halfway through. His radio crackled with static as soon as he crossed. The threshold then went dead entirely. The hallway stretched ahead, patient room doors yawning open on either side. Ray's flashlight beam swept across walls covered in what looked like patient artwork, crude drawings scratched and carved into the plaster. Faces with hollow eyes, hands reaching through bars, and scattered throughout, the same phrase repeated. Over and over, "The doctor is in." Ray found Sarah's camera bag in room 237, equipment scattered across the floor as if dropped in haste. Her voice recorder lay beside an overturned bed, still running. He pressed rewind and listened. Sarah's voice, professional and calm. The patient rooms show signs of recent disturbance. Bed sheets appear to have been moved, and there are fresh scratches on the walls that a new voice cut in, gravelly and old. "Visiting hours are over, my dear. Time for your treatment." Sarah's scream was followed by the sound of struggling. Then static. Ray pocketed the recorder and drew his service weapon. According to the timestamp, the recording had been made less than an hour ago. A sound echoed from somewhere above, the unmistakable squeak of gurney wheels rolling across linoleum. Then came voices, multiple voices, all talking at once in a chorus of medical jargon and patient pleas that seemed to emanate from the building's very walls. Ray headed for the stairwell, his flashlight beam dancing ahead of him like a desperate prayer in the growing darkness. The third floor of Holloway Institute had once housed the special treatment, wing electroshock therapy, hydrotherapy, and Dr. Holloway's experimental procedures that the state investigators never fully uncovered before his disappearance. Ray emerged from the stairwell to find the hallway lit by flickering fluorescent lights that should have been powerless for decades. The air hummed with electrical current and the distant sound of machinery that defied explanation. Doors lined both sides of the corridor, each marked with faded placards. Shock therapy, isolation, surgical suite, and at the far end, double. Doors marked Dr. Holloway, Chief of Psychiatry. The sound of the gurney wheels was clearer now, coming from behind the surgical suite doors. Ray approached carefully, weapon raised, and peered through the wire mesh window. Sarah Chen lay strapped to a gurney in the center of the room, conscious but unable to move. Around her, figures in hospital whites moved with practiced efficiency, but something was wrong with them. Their faces were pale and slack, their movements too fluid, and when they turned their heads, Ray could see through them to the decay-stained walls beyond. Standing over Sarah was a tall man in a doctor's coat, his back to the door. When he spoke, Ray recognized the gravelly voice from the recording. "Patient exhibits signs of severe anxiety and paranoid delusions," Dr. Holloway said, his voice carrying clearly through the glass. "She claims to be a photographer, but we know better, don't we? She's here for treatment, just like all the others." The ghostly orderlies nodded in unison, their hollow eyes reflecting the surgical lights that cast no real illumination. Ray tried the door handle. Locked, he raised his weapon and shot out the wire mesh window, the gunshot echoing through the hospital like thunder. But when the glass fragments settled, the room was empty except for Sarah, still strapped to the gurney, her eyes wide with terror. "Behind you," she whispered. Ray spun around to find Dr. Holloway standing in the hallway, no longer translucent, but solid as stone. His face was a ruin of decay and surgical scars, his white coat stained with decades of blood and other things Ray didn't want to identify. "Detective Morrison," Holloway said, consulting a clipboard that materialized in his hands. "I've been expecting you. Room 247 has just opened up." The orderlies emerged from the walls themselves, their hands reaching for Ray with fingers that ended in rusty surgical instruments. He fired 3 shots center mass, but the bullets passed through them like they were made of mist. "The treatment is quite painless," Dr. Holloway assured him as the orderlies closed in. "My patients rarely remember anything afterward. In fact, they rarely remember anything at all." Ray's vision began to blur as cold hands gripped his arms. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Sarah's mouth, moving silently behind the surgical suite's broken window, forming words he couldn't hear but somehow understood. Run. From the Journal of Dr. Marcus Holloway, dated October 13, 1987. The final entry: the state investigators will arrive tomorrow, but they're too late to stop what I've begun. 22 years of research, of pushing the boundaries between life and death, between sanity and enlightenment. They call it abuse, but they don't understand the magnificent work we've accomplished here. Patient number 1847, Morrison. Raymond responded well to the initial treatment. Like the others, he experienced some disorientation upon awakening, but the integration process is proceeding normally. He believes he's still searching for patient number 1846, Shun. Sarah, not realizing he's been here for 3 days now. Time moves differently within these walls. Another unexpected benefit of the procedures. Patient 1846 has proven more resistant than anticipated. Her mind keeps trying to return to her previous existence, clinging to memories of cameras and deadlines and a world outside these walls. But we are patient. We have been patient for 37 years. Ever since that first night when the boundary between our world and theirs became ... permeable. The investigators think I disappeared, but I never left. How could I abandon my life's work? My patients still need me, now more than ever. They wander the halls at night, reliving their treatments, helping me welcome the newcomers who stumble into our sanctuary, seeking thrills and photographs and stories to tell. They always leave with so much more. Patient number 1843, Williams Marcus, was one of those urban explorers found wandering Route 47 last spring. He claimed to have seen terrible things, spoke of ghostly doctors and patients who wouldn't stay in their graves. The state hospital psychiatrists diagnosed him with severe PTSD and dissociative disorder. They never considered that he might be telling the truth. Now he helps with the evening rounds, his memories of the outside world growing fainter each day. Soon he won't remember there ever was an outside world. None of them do, eventually. The beauty of the treatment is its permanence. Once the neural pathways have been properly adjusted, the patients become ideal staff members. Compliant, dedicated, eternally present. They help me prepare the newcomers, sharing their own experiences, easing the transition. Patient number 1789, Chun. David arrived last month, drawn by reports of his missing sister. The family resemblance made the integration particularly poetic. Brother and sister reunited in service to a higher cause. I can hear the investigators' cars approaching even now. They think they'll find evidence of wrongdoing, of patients who died under my care. They're partially correct. The old Marcus Holloway, the one bound by conventional ethics and limited understanding, did indeed die here 37 years ago. Something far more evolved took his place. The hospital never truly closed, you see. We simply became more selective about our admissions process. The state can board up the windows and chain the doors, but they cannot seal what has already opened. The boundary grows thinner each year, and soon there will be no need for the pretense of abandonment. Patient number 1847 is calling from the hallway. It's time for evening rounds, and we have new admissions to process. The cycle continues, as it always has, as it always will. The treatment room is prepared. The instruments are sterile. The patients are ready to help. Welcome to Holloway Institute. Visiting hours never end. His white coat stained with decades of blood and other things Ray didn't want to identify. Detective Morrison, Holloway said, consulting a clipboard that materialized in his hands. I've been expecting you. Room 247 has just opened up. The orderlies emerged from the walls themselves. their hands reaching for Ray with fingers that ended in rusty surgical instruments. He fired 3 shots center mass, but the bullets passed through them like they were made of mist. "The treatment is quite painless," Dr. Holloway assured him as the orderlies closed in. "My patients rarely remember anything afterward. In fact, they rarely remember anything at all." Ray's vision began to blur as cold hands gripped his arms. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Sarah's mouth moving silently behind the surgical suite's broken window, forming words he couldn't hear but somehow understood. "Run." State Police Report. Case hashtag H-4471. Filed by Investigator Janet Millstate. October 15th, 2024. Subject: Missing persons Chen, Sarah, photojournalist, and Morrison, Raymond, local police detective. Location: abandoned Holloway Institute. Route: 47. After extensive search operations involving K9 units, thermal imaging, and a full structural survey of the abandoned Holloway Institute, no trace of the missing persons has been found. Both Chen and Morrison's vehicles were located in the facility's parking area. Keys still in ignition. Personal effects undisturbed. Physical evidence: Chen's camera equipment found scattered in room 237. Memory cards, corrupted Morrison's service weapon, located in 3rd floor hallway. Fully loaded voice recorder containing partial documentation of Chen's exploration, attached as evidence. H4471A. Fresh disturbances in patient rooms suggesting recent human activity. Electrical readings showing impossible power fluctuations. In a building disconnected from the grid for 37 years witness testimony. Multiple motorists reported seeing lights moving through the building between October 13th to 15th. 3 individuals claimed to have observed figures in hospital whites, moving past 3rd floor windows, though thermal imaging detected no human heat. Signatures. Margaret Holloway, age 89. Dr. Marcus Holloway's surviving sister provided disturbing context during her interview. She claims her brother had become obsessed with breaking down the barriers between states of consciousness in his final years at the Institute. According to Ms. Holloway, her brother believed death was simply another form of treatment, and that consciousness could be preserved and redirected through experimental procedures. Marcus always said the hospital would be his greatest achievement, she stated. Even after the state shut it down, he used to tell me the work would continue. "The patients need me," he'd say. "They'll always need me." Anomalous findings. During the investigation, team members reported equipment malfunctions, temperature drops, and what can only be described as auditory hallucinations, voices, speaking medical terminology, the sound of outdated equipment, and what several officers described as distant screaming. Of particular note, Officer Patricia Valdez reported seeing Detective Morrison in a 3rd floor window during the 2nd day of searching. When teams immediately searched the area, no trace of Morrison was found. Security footage from Valdez's body camera shows only an empty window frame. Pattern analysis, research into similar disappearances, reveals a disturbing trend. Since 1987, 17 individuals have vanished after entering the Holloway Institute. All were later found wandering local highways in states of severe psychological distress, with no memory of their time inside the facility. Medical examinations revealed unusual neural activity patterns that neurology specialists could not explain. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, consulting psychiatrist, noted in her report, the brain scans of these individuals show activity in regions associated with trauma response, but also unusual formations in areas typically dormant in healthy patients. It's as if something has been added to their neural architecture. Current status: the Holloway Institute has been declared a hazardous site and will be permanently sealed. However, given the facility's history and the ongoing disappearances, I recommend continuous monitoring and the posting of permanent warning signs. 3 days after filing this report, I began experiencing vivid dreams about working at Holloway Institute. In these dreams, I wear a doctor's coat and carry a clipboard with patient files. The dreams feel more real than my waking hours. I've requested reassignment to a different case. Addendum October 22, 2024. Investigator. Mills has been found wandering Route 47 and has been committed for psychiatric evaluation. Case file H4471 is being transferred to federal oversight. The Holloway Institute remains closed to the public. Visiting hours are now 24/7.